Hi, I'm Beena Patel, a physician associate turned spiritual mentor, quantum healer, women's coach, and speaker. Welcome to The Voice That Sees. This podcast is an intimate dialogue on topics ranging from science and spirituality to alternative forms of healing, vulnerable storytelling, the esoteric ancient wisdom, the power of individual transformation, and how it impacts the collective evolution of humanity. Each episode, you will learn how to evolve by shifting your mindset and ways of being, express your vulnerability to heal and transform, and channel your emotions into self-expression, creating a greater impact in the world. Let's continue your journey together. Welcome back to the first full episode of The Voice That Sees. Today's episode is all about my journey with cancer when I was 21, as well as how it shifted me onto this path of deep holistic healing, and also how it uncovered a lot of different God-given gifts. And the message that I hope to convey today is that whatever you may be experiencing in life or something that you have undergone that may have been so challenging is really there to help you unlock something of higher purpose, something with deep meaning. And when you can heal those layers of unprocessed emotions and peel back the different limiting beliefs and narratives that are no longer needed on your path, you can unlock those gifts for yourself too. And use those gifts to ultimately impact humanity in a very beautiful and empowering way. So my journey started off at the age of 21 when I was in physician assistant school for the first time, and really excited because a lot of my friends at that time were still figuring out their lives and going to New York and partying and doing all these things that I wanted to do. And instead, I was such an ambitious person that I went straight from my college, my undergraduate years, to a graduate school program. And I remember them telling us that first week of orientation that we can basically say goodbye to our social lives for the next 2 years, because it was expected that we would have multiple exams per week, as well as different clinical trainings that we had to do as well, whether that meant going to a hospital or a clinic for further training, or having these actors and actresses who played patients come in and we would have to diagnose and pretend that we're treating them in this clinical setting, and then we would be assessed by one of our faculty members. So this was a really stressful time in most of these students' lives, not just for me, but also my peers. And a lot of stuff came up during that time where I'm also noticing that even despite having this diagnosis, I was also witness to these unhealthy relationship dynamics that were playing out in my life with this person that I was dating at that time, and noticing the different breakups within my classmates and just seeing that so many people were undergoing stress. And I thought it was kind of ridiculous that we're in this program to become clinicians and to help take care of people, and yet we're being taught that taking care of ourselves will be challenging for these next 2 years because we're in training. So it didn't really make sense to me, but I'm intuitive, and instinctively I knew that something was off. Now, at that time of the diagnosis, within those first 2 weeks, there was a lot of questioning. Why me? Why now? Why is this happening? And asking all these questions from a disempowered place, and also honoring the humanity that when things like this happen, there's no right response. There's no, oh, I handle it so beautifully. Whatever unfolds was meant to happen. And so for that next couple of weeks, I went back and forth feeling anger and feeling sadness and also alone. Something I've also heard a lot of my cancer patients tell me, that even though they know they have a support system and people are telling them, I'm here for you. If you want to talk, I'm here, I'm listening. It's just not the same, because anytime we go through these painful, traumatic experiences, especially when something is a shock to the nervous system and might happen abruptly, it feels lonely. It feels as though even if another person had undergone something similar, they're not actually in your shoes at that time. And that's part of our individual human experience. I try to hold this facade that everything was okay. And my classmates were asking me, what's going on? Your eyes look puffy. You look really tired lately. And I didn't want to admit what was happening in my life. And also, I didn't want pity. And so holding all these different emotions while navigating the stress of PA school and also being empathic and feeling deeply sensitive to what a lot of my classmates were experiencing as well, you can probably imagine what a burden and load that felt like. And so many things were falling apart at this time. And when I look back, I can actually see that they were falling apart for a reason so that something more beautiful could come together. And so even in this relationship that I was in where I noticed that my voice was constantly silenced. And so interestingly, the cancer that I had was thyroid cancer, which is in the area of the throat. And for anyone who doesn't know much about chakras and energy centers, the throat chakra governs our self-expression, and not just any form of self-expression, but our authentic self-expression. So speaking to your authentic truth, speaking to how you really feel, what you really feel, and coming from a place of balance. And you can notice anytime the throat chakra is not in alignment when either you're repressing your voice and not speaking to the totality of your needs, your wants, your feelings, or you become aggressive and then speak over others and don't really hold space for other people when they have something to share, as in their opinions and their perspectives. And so the throat chakra is really important and holds a lot of significance, especially in this age of Aquarius where more people are wanting to be self-expressed through their art, through their soul medicine, through their gifts. And we'll touch upon this later. However, it all ties back to the throat chakra and how much power it holds with the things that we are speaking both to the world as well as within ourselves, our own internal dialogue. And so whether I knew it or not at that time, I was pretty open to some of the remarks that this person was telling me. And whenever I stood up for myself, I was quickly shut down. And so it was just reaffirming this cycle of feeling powerless over my voice, not being able to stand up for myself and speak to what I really wanted to say. And I'm noticing all these things, and I know something is off. But how do you speak to these things when you're in your healing journey and literally alchemizing the very thing that you need to alchemize to transform and become the most empowered version of yourself who is able to speak her entire truth? So that was the initiation of a beautiful journey in my life. And if there is one big origin that I can go back to and think, okay, this was the moment that really catapulted me onto a different path, the path that is most authentic to my soul and why I came to this planet to share what I'm here to share, it had to have been that diagnosis, because healthcare diagnoses, when you look at it from a more spiritual and energetic perspective, the physical manifestation is there as a byproduct of things that were not tended to on a deeper level. So in essence, what you're really looking at is something that is spiritually misaligned, something that is energetically off balance. And for me, what I learned is that, yes, I grew up in a childhood dynamic where speaking our truth wasn't really welcome. Also growing up in a Catholic school, which nothing against religion, but it's just the way that it was taught. There was this thing with punishment. And so if you said something that was not what the teacher wanted to hear, or maybe you said the wrong thing, you were given detention and this reaffirmation of being punished for using your voice is something that has been really ingrained in society, not just in education, but also in our justice system, in business, in so many different places where hierarchy plays a role. And so this is really important information that we're discussing today. And so I'm noticing these different shifts and breakdowns. And ultimately, what I discussed in my previous episode was that you don't really embody the full lesson until you really learn to take different action steps. And if you can't learn to take different action steps for whatever reason, whether you freeze or don't know how to respond, usually God will take care of it for you. At least that's been my journey. And so the final breaking point was 2 months shy of my graduation. I had a rotation that was actually way before this moment. But at this point, my school said, based on your performance, we don't believe that you would be a competent clinician. And even though my GPA was above what it needed to be, they held this preceptor with such high regard, even though I later found out from multiple different facilities that this doctor was on high alert because she missed some patients' deliveries. She wasn't showing up in full ethical, morally ethical standards that a clinician should. It didn't matter to my school. They basically sided with the preceptor. And so at this time, this really hurt my morale, and it made me feel that I didn't have what it takes to make my dreams happen. And a lot of this was related to unhealthy childhood dynamics. And I know this story is not unique. If you're listening to this, can you ever recall a period in your life where whether your caregiver or parent was stressed out and took their anger out on you and maybe made some remarks in passing that really impacted you even to your adult life? And we can love our parents. This isn't to blame our parents, but some of these events really take hold of the way that we perceive the world. And so if you've been told that you're not enough, or you received love based on your achievements, how high your grades were, did you get straight A's? Did you finish all your chores? Then you usually go out into the world looking for approval. And the way that humanity has been conditioned to seek this approval is by working until they're burnt out, or staying in really toxic environments and abusive dynamics until they feel that they can't take it anymore. And so once I got dismissed from this program, that really was the breaking point at that time in my life. And I knew something had to change. And I also felt that that change was out of my control. And as life would have it, I ended up going to Costa Rica on this beautiful trip with some close friends at that time. And my entire life changes when I get back. I'm noticing that I feel freedom in my body. I feel peace in my mind. And I'm speaking a lot of the intentions that I want to happen. And I'm speaking them out loud, and they're coming true really quickly. And I'm taking note of all this without really piecing it together at the time. And I actually live in Costa Rica now, which I'll also share in a future episode because I love this story. And so I'm starting to notice all these beautiful, positive, miraculous changes in my life. And I'm also being led onto a path of holistic healing. So I ended up getting back into another PA program just 6 months later, not even a year, 6 months later. And it's in my dream city, New York City. I spent the next 3 years learning at this school, being in the city, immersed in all the arts and the music, the concerts, and just the beauty of being in one of the most amazing metropolitan cities in the world. And I'm really feeling good. However, the stress of PA school starts to settle in again. And I know that this time I wanted to do things differently. Instead of burning myself out and studying until the wee hours of the morning, I decided that I would study as much as I can and then let God take care of the rest. And I did really well. I know that I completed a lot of this training before in my first program. However, I had so much perseverance and grit that I knew that whatever I didn't know, perhaps it just wasn't ready for that to be unlocked within me. And I was trusting a lot more. And this art of presentation starts to become a bigger deal in my life. So in the medical world, we have to do this thing called presentations where we clinically present our patients. And there's an art to it. It's not giving the synopsis of the patient you're providing care for in a way that's poetic and artistic, but rather getting to the main details and knowing exactly what people want to hear. Whoever you're working with, whether it's the doctor or the pharmacist, they want to hear certain bits of that information. So you really want to extrapolate the data that you need to and say it in a way that's very succinct and straightforward. And so I'm learning the different ways of expression. And I'm also being called on this path of yoga to manage stress at that time. And I'm finding that the more that I practice yoga, the more that I meditate, I'm able to speak things with clarity. There's no second guessing. There's no wishy-washiness. It's straight to the point. And even the people that I'm interacting with during this period of my life say, the way you said it, it just landed. Like I understood what you said exactly. the way I needed to hear it. And as I'm presenting different presentations during my program, I had such a fear of public speaking at that time. However, I noticed that whenever I was speaking to the things I was really passionate about, such as complementary and alternative medicine, which I did my master's thesis on, something just overcame me and I was able to speak so fluidly. And I'm noticing these different synchronicities in my life, and it feels really beautiful. And so what was happening during that period was through the yoga, through meditation, and opening up to the world of alternative healing with Reiki and energy healing, I was moving repressed emotions out of my body. I was releasing that and coming back into a state of balance from deep within, inner peace, harmony, and being grounded into the earth. Because as much as this creative potential that moves through our crown chakra, that can come through our channel, as much as that's so beautiful, it holds less power when it's just there in the ethers. It actually becomes the most powerful when we're able to take it from the ethers and manifest it into physical form. And so through this energy work, I'm feeling more whole in my body. I'm studying for my exams with so much more ease, and I'm taking less time to obtain all the information that I need to know for these exams. And being able to speak with more clarity and confidence and power, I realized that it was my throat chakra that started to come back into alignment by releasing the anger that I had felt from the diagnosis as well as unhealthy childhood dynamics. By releasing this deep-rooted resentment that I didn't even know I had, which a lot of people feel that they don't have anger and resentment within them. However, these are very powerful emotions that are actually part of our human experience. And the reason that most people try to avoid it is because it feels so triggering and activating. However, there are many tools that you can use to hold it. And so what I like to refer to or allude to is that anger doesn't have to be this negative thing. It's actually very sacred, and it usually moves us and propels us to shift something in our life that needs to shift so that we can realign and come back to a state of peace. And so during that time, there was a lot of anger and resentment being released. And the more that I gained this knowledge, this spiritual knowledge over time with my own evolution, with my own learning and healing, I learned about different tools that I could use also for ancestral healing. And I learned that a lot of my ancestors, especially the women in my lineage, didn't feel safe to speak their truth. And these emotions can actually get passed on genetically in our DNA. Science is so fascinating that it's actually showing the study of epigenetics, where even when you were an egg in your mother's womb and your grandmother was pregnant with your mom, which means that you were just a little tiny seed, so to speak, in your mom's womb, while your mom was in her mother's womb, that anything that impacted your grandmother could have actually impacted you just by the study of epigenetics, which says that the environment can impact our gene expression. And this is so powerful. This is such powerful knowledge because this explains why so many descendants of Holocaust survivors, for instance, have so much fear when they're actually living such magnificent lives. It's like, why do they have the fear? And they've done studies on this that showed a lot of people are holding on to fears that their ancestors had because they were living in a time of fighting for their survival in really traumatic environments. And so whatever I was holding on to from both the diagnosis at 21, as well as having this wound around speaking the truth, using the voice that was passed on ancestrally, it really impacted me because cancer doesn't just happen. And it especially doesn't just happen to someone in their 20s. The first thing most clinicians told me when I was diagnosed is that this usually impacts women in their 40s. So it's not actually typical that we see this in someone in their 20s. So it just goes to show you how emotions that are unprocessed can take a toll. And yet it doesn't have to be that way. The more that people understand that health is not just physical, it's also emotional and energetic and mental and spiritual, even financial, then we can use all these tools to keep our energy field in alignment, keep realigning with our inner peace. Instead of waiting for that moment when things get really rough and then trying to fix it or treat it, we can actually live a life where we make our energetic balance a priority and learn to come back into alignment every single day. And then eventually when you get to a certain stage of your own evolution, you make it a priority every single moment. And there is an art to it. So all of this is happening in my life. And ultimately, through my most recent evolution that took place for most of 2023 was deep quantum healing around my voice. This podcast has been in the works for over 2 years. I've known that I was meant to start this and that I'm here to speak on big stages. I love empowering people. And I'm so thankful to have this platform that can reach people worldwide. So I'm really grateful for this. I've known about this vision for over 2 years, and I just couldn't get myself to do it. There was a lot of fear and doubt that came into the picture. And what I discovered during this healing journey that I just went through in 2023 was that there was a lot of repressed memories, both my own as well as ancestral. And as I did quantum healing with the throat chakra, I started getting opportunities to speak. And when I started speaking on stages and getting in front of people, I went on the Great American Speak Off and auditioned for them and actually made it to the semifinals. And it was such a beautiful experience. It really pulled me out of my comfort zone, which I'm so grateful for. It taught me that, yes, there is healing that we can do, but part of the healing is actually in doing the thing, just doing it, getting out of our comfort zone, meeting the fears and doubts and saying, okay, I see you. However, I'm still going to do this thing. And we can do those hard things. And that's what the Great American Speak Off did for me. It really allowed me to come out of my comfort zone and feel incredible when I came out on the other side, especially because I had to pitch my story so many times. So it was practice in itself. And all of this unlocked this creative potential within me, which I want to share with anyone who's listening to this, that there is healing in whatever you are experiencing. You can move through it in real time and express yourself and use this vessel of self-expression to be an avenue of healing. When I worked at the cancer institutions, one of the things that many patients loved was music and art therapy. And it's because music is so healing. Many of the most beautiful songs that just strike a chord within us are songs that were created based on something the artist was going through in his or her life at that time. Whether it was a breakup, a loss, they channeled it into that song, and you can feel the emotions that they are experiencing, the emotions that they are purging during that event in their life. And so if you're someone who believes, oh, I need to get out on the other side before I can share this, yes, there is a point where you may need to get to before you can share the full potency of what you're going to share. Meaning a lot of times if you've just been hit with something in your life, sharing exactly from that moment can be freeing. But a lot of times you don't empower people from that place because you're still deep in your stuff. And so what may be more empowering for you in that moment is to actually find ways to heal and release, whether it's breath work, yoga, therapy, coaching, whatever it is, going on retreat. However, there comes another point where there's not as much of a charge around the situation and you feel that you're freed up. You just know it. You feel lighter in your body. You feel there's different creative ideas coming into your mind. And these aren't just creative ideas for art. They're also creative ideas for your business, as in maybe you felt stuck in which way you can move and pivot, but all of a sudden you're like, wait, I had funds in that account, or wait, I have resources there that I've just not tapped into because I thought I need to wait for another time. All of a sudden, all these creative solutions start to appear. And that's because in releasing those emotions and releasing the emotional and energetic charge around the situation, you have created space in your body. And it's from that place where expression comes through you naturally. And when you do this work, particularly around your throat chakra, which I also want to share, I do throat chakra healing. It's called quantum activation. It's quantum voice activation. And so I'll drop the link below in the show notes for anyone who's interested. This is such powerful work because when you're able to heal your voice, it's not just what you are expressing into the world and your community. It's that you speak from a place of power. You speak from a place where people naturally feel empowered when they're around you and when they hear you speaking to what you're passionate about. it's not so much about what you're telling them to do. It's rather you just embodying it. People naturally can feel uplifted and a sense of willpower that, hey, she was able to move through that. I can move through this too. And the cadence, the intonation, the healing frequencies of the voice, when you've moved through something, navigated through the life transition and come out on the other side, transformed, empowered, whole again. From that place, when you speak, people can feel the power of transformation through your voice. And this is why I believe throat chakra healing and balancing is so important. And the thyroid health obviously is linked to it because it's in the area of the throat chakra. And so for any woman who's undergoing any shifts or changes in her hormones, this is all important work because it's all tied to energy and emotions. Emotions literally are energy in motion. So it's all interconnected. As we're walking into this beautiful age of Aquarius and self-expression, there's going to be so much information that continues to pour out as more people unlock the power of their voice and share their deepest truths, their wisdom, their art, their creativity. And the invitation is to, yes, use discernment around what feels right and resonant for you. And also to understand that when you are able to hold space for others speaking their truth, and also hold space for your own authentic truth, your unique self-expression. This is how we actually transform the world. Because through the art of conscious communication, where we can really listen to things that are both seen and unseen, heard and unheard, really understanding body language, using our subtle senses to pick up on actually what feels true for me from what was said versus what I can release, we keep our energy field clear. And it's from that space that creativity naturally comes through because we're completely tapped into God in those moments where we feel open and available to receive those intuitive nudges, those divine downloads, whatever you want to call it. We're open and available to receive so that creative idea can find us and flow through us and then be birthed onto the earthly plane. And so the sacral chakra is also related to this because the sacral chakra governs our sense of creativity. However, I feel that it's strongly linked to the throat chakra because there's just a lot of medicine that comes through our voice, whether it's singing, chanting, speaking, writing poetry, coaching even. How are we speaking to people? How are we speaking to ourselves when the inner critic comes up? Because we all have one. How do we speak to our ego? How do we create safety within our own minds and our own bodies? Because how we speak to ourselves can be felt by others as well. And so this is an ongoing alchemical transformation that each individual is going through. And each time we up level, there's just new things that come up to be released and also new codes to unlock so that we can share more of our truth and wisdom. And the throat chakra is really important for that because without knowing who we are authentically, we might be speaking someone else's truth, even though it doesn't feel resonant in our body. Or we might be holding back on the fullness of all the opinions and perspectives that we wanted to express. And so this hinders our communication because we leave situations as incomplete. And if you're listening to this, something you can ask yourself is, have you ever had a situation where you walked away and said to yourself, there was more to say, but I was upset and I was a little nervous and I didn't want to rattle the cages. I don't want to be too much. And so then you dim your light and then you go back and then you feel resentful with yourself because there was more to be shared, but you're afraid of how the other person would respond. And so one of the things that's been unlocked for me, the more that I've tended to my throat chakra, is that I'm not responsible for other people's emotions. There's a line and difference between holding space for another's truth versus also holding space for the entirety of someone's emotions. This is where energetic boundaries also come into play. And I'll do a whole segment on that because it's so important, especially for empaths. This is more so that we can hold space for what someone is speaking in any given moment and really hearing the entirety of what someone else is expressing, because this is how we can make positive changes moving forward that can actually help all of humanity move forward in a beautiful way. And I think that a lot of times when situations are incomplete or left as is, whether it was because of ghosting, feeling unsafe to speak to your truth, so you kind of just walk away from the situation or don't know how to speak to it and are afraid of how the other person will respond because of rejection. All these situations that are left incomplete. And no, I'm not saying that you have to respond to every single situation, but for the ones that do, for the ones that still hold a charge and you just know that there's something left unsaid, I feel that this is important. I feel that there are ways to go back and clean up a situation. And it's important to note that, because when we hold on to certain things and don't express the fullness of what we need to express, we're actually holding ourselves back from our highest creative potential. And unconsciously, we could also be holding someone else back. And we're not responsible for that because they too can show up in a conversation. Yet it's important to note, because this is why people say things like, oh, unfinished business. What do we mean by that? There are conflicts and situations that were left with things unsaid, essentially. And so a former coworker at one of my jobs had said something to me that really stood out to me over the years that I want to share here, which is learning to close the loop, whether it's in emails, texts. Instead of just walking away, if you know that someone's still holding on to a possibility of a partnership or even romantically something, just saying, thank you for this beautiful time. I'm feeling into this and it just doesn't feel like it's in alignment for me. So I'm going to have to let this go. However, I wish you the best. There are so many beautiful ways to let things go. And when we do that, it actually sets both people free. I remember there's this one situation where, full transparency, I used to ghost. And it was because I was afraid of how people would handle rejection, even though I've been rejected myself. But it was just this feeling of being a people pleaser and being afraid of saying no. And so balancing my throat chakra actually really helped me to honor the sacred yes and also the sacred no, and being firm in my stance when it is an absolute no. No confusion around it or murkiness. When it's a no, it's a no. And so one of the things I started practicing was just being honest with people. And though it's not something that I've perfected yet, I have found grace in just being able to let people know this is how I felt. And I know that there might have been some connection, and yet something is telling me intuitively that this is not meant to go forth any longer. So I wish you the best. You're amazing. And I know that there will be another opportunity. I wish you the best. And that's it. I literally had one guy that I went on a date with. This was years ago. And after I was able to say this to him, he literally told me, this is not the response that I expected. I really had a great time. Like, that was one of the best dates ever. However, the way you just said that, I just know whoever ends up with you is just the luckiest guy ever. And I only want the best things for you. And it was so clean and so beautiful. It was this feeling of warmth and peace that just washed over my heart. And it showed me that, yes, it's possible to walk away from situations without all the drama and these repetitive cycles of re-traumatizing both ourselves and other people. There are actual ways to clean things up. And this is why I believe this new paradigm is really going to incorporate healthier ways of communicating with people and also cleaning up situations where we may have screwed up, because evidently we are all human and we're all learning from our own glitches along the way. So it's this balance of how do we honor being empowered in our communication and speaking to our authentic truth, and also admitting that every up level, there's new truths to uncover. And sometimes it comes up like wildfire. And when there's new boundaries to set and new things to ask for in your life, it might not be easy. And it's okay to embrace the discomfort that it brings up and also clean things up along the way. I truly believe that the best leaders still make quote unquote mistakes. And yet they're able to go back and say, I can look back on this and see where I may have messed up, and I'm willing to hold space for how you feel about this, and what can we do to move forward in a constructive way that actually meets both of us in the most empowering way. So it's not about compromising, but actually meeting the fullness of both of our needs. And to me, this feels like a question I just want to leave any listener who's listening to this with is, how can we speak and communicate in ways that express the fullness of who we are, and also leave this room for our humanity and embrace that vulnerability is power. And it's also not the easiest thing to step into. So how can we hold space for this balance, or trying to find the balance of speaking to our truth, expressing ourselves, and also honoring that it might be a little messy along the way, and that's okay. This is the work of a lifetime, and I'm so honored to be on this journey with you. And I look forward to hearing any insights that you may be having as you listen to this. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Voice That Sees. Please be sure to check out more episodes every other Tuesday on Apple, Spotify, iHeart, or wherever you listen to your podcast. For additional content, you can follow me on Instagram at The Yoga Movement and YouTube at The Yoga Movement NYC. You can also check out my coaching programs and unique offers on my website at theyogamovementnyc.com to help support your individual and personal transformation. Until next time, be you and be well.